I'm actually gonna go over 2 critical incidents for you guys and discuss some of the tactics that are being used. You've probably seen both these videos, but neither of these body cams are very long. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do that by liking this video, subscribing to the channel if you're not already, and leaving a comment down below. In this first video, you have tactical officers who are serving a warrant at an apartment, and they are serving this warrant on a male who is said to be or charged with harboring a juvenile or concealing a juvenile, and they are going to this apartment and serving this warrant in an effort to recover that juvenile.
That's it, please! Please! Hands up now! Hands up now! Hands up! Get your hands up! Hands up! Hands up!
I don't have any issues with the speed at which they're moving. It looks to me like they're clearing the apartment systematically and they're not moving too fast, but just something to consider. A person who is being kidnapped and you are rescuing that person is not the same tactical situation as, you know, a juvenile who is run away, which it sounds like that's what this is. So do we need to be running through a structure like our hair is on fire in this situation? No, you don't. I'm not saying that's what they're doing. I don't think that's what they're doing, but that's just something that you should take note of, right? What is driving us to continuously push through this objective as fast as we can? Is there an immediate risk to somebody's life in that moment, right? They already have a warrant for this person, the male inside. He's been with this juvenile for at least a couple days, if not a week or whatever the case is. They're outside the apartment and they knock and announce for maybe a minute or less or whatever, right? So at the point in which you enter, a bunch of time has already passed. Do we have a tactical advantage by moving quickly or as fast as we possibly can to clear every single room as fast as we possibly can? Probably not. Again, I'm not saying that's what they're doing. I just want you guys to be able to identify the difference in these types of situations based on the facts and circumstances and how that information drives your tactics and your decision making. When you see this initial officer come to this threshold right here, obviously the open door is the greatest threat and they are treating it as such, which is what they should be doing. I would lean on the side of caution here and not just immediately overexpose myself to this open door. And I would be dealing with what's inside the room from outside the room and doing that in a systematic way. Once you identify, okay, I see him, maybe now I'm pushing across the threshold to allow another officer to get his gun into the fight. And then we're trying to deal with him by giving him commands from where we are. You see this officer push into the room and then he muzzle strikes this guy. And the reason that he would do that or you would do that, I'm not suggesting that you should because it's probably against your policy and not a trained tactic, is to create space. And it appears that's what he achieves, what he's trying to do, and he does create that space, but then he immediately, you know, kind of runs after the guy and tries to grab him, which, you know, you really shouldn't do if you have a rifle that isn't secure, right? That's kind of the first takeaway there. Secondly, if we're using a muzzle strike to create that distance, well then now we want to maintain that distance so we can keep our eyes on this guy, we can watch his hands, we can see what he's doing, and we can make a decision from there. Because he actually went after this guy to wrap his arms around him, I guess, to try to detain him or arrest him, you know, he produced a handgun, which obviously is bad for you if you're the one grabbing onto him because he could just shoot you and you'd never see it coming. But also his partner, who now sees that the guy has a gun and is wanting to engage him, really can't because now, you know, you're in close proximity to him. And actually you notice that the officer has his arms around him, and it appears to me that, you know, obviously his partner would want to shoot this guy right then, but he actually waits until he gets a clear shot. The officer actually moves his arms out from around the guy's chest area, and then he's able to engage him. One of the things that I was taught early on was if I can cover you with lethal coverage, right, that is my safety, right? I don't need to close the distance until it's safe for us to do so. So in this particular situation, obviously this is a very fluid and dynamic situation. If we are addressing you as, you know, hey, get down, get down, get down, and you're not getting down, you're still moving around, that's okay with me. I'm still gonna cover you with lethal coverage, and what happens from that point is up to the suspect. If we are going to move in to arrest or detain him, we're going to try to do that when it's safe for us to do so. You know, when I can't see your hands is probably not the right time to do that. And, you know, if we are going to do that, you need to make sure you're being covered with lethal coverage while you're doing that. Obviously, you have other options. If one has lethal coverage, somebody else is going less lethal, and maybe we're tasing that guy, while we're holding lethal coverage. And throughout that process of while we're trying to deal with this problem, we still have the opportunity to engage him should he produce a weapon or should he act in such a way that makes it reasonable for us to use lethal force. Then obviously you have the dynamic here where you have the juvenile who's with this guy producing a large kitchen knife, and she actually does stab or slice at an officer but hits him in his helmet, and she ultimately gets arrested and she's taken to jail. Now I realize that this juvenile producing a knife is like a one-off freak thing that nobody expected would happen, and it's not something that you would even really be consciously thinking about or something that I'm even claiming that you should be aware of, right? But another aspect of closing the distance and grabbing onto somebody in a room that you really haven't cleared yet, right, is also now that you don't have everything in front of you, right? If I'm at the threshold and I'm working this problem, I see the problem and I'm giving commands, I'm doing all this from the threshold, everything that I know is potentially a threat is right here in front of me, versus once you close that distance, now you're just accepting these other possibilities that otherwise you wouldn't have to mitigate if you just maintained whatever distance you could and dealt with that problem from the threshold. Now, I'm not saying he moves and you need to keep eyes on him so you move inside, but just be conscious of when it's appropriate to actually close that distance. So obviously the worst case scenario here is you make entry and you're moving down the hallway and you jump into the threshold and there's the guy's in there with a rifle and he just starts shooting, or with a handgun and he just starts shooting as soon as you expose yourself to the threshold. Well, when you immediately overexpose yourself like that and you haven't processed the room yet and you're getting engaged, your brain is going to tell you to get out of the way if you're not already shot or critically wounded, right? So you're probably going to move out away from the threshold, and now no one really knows what's going on. You're trying to mitigate that gunfire by getting away from it. And so that's why I would err on the side of caution here and kind of pie that threshold, take up what I can. When I see him and I see that it's okay for me to expose myself now, transition maybe to the other side of the threshold, let me get another gun into the fight. That's how I would handle that problem to mitigate the worst case scenario more effectively, which is taking on that immediate, barrage of gunfire. I know people are going to say, well, you're in the hallway, we need to get out of hallways. Well, is it better to stay in the hallway and deal with the problem from the threshold on the person we know is the bad guy who is potentially armed, or is it better to get inside the room with the guy that we know has a gun or is potentially armed? And obviously in law enforcement, if we know the bad guy is in there because we're looking at him and we are there for him, when has there ever been another time in law enforcement where you've had the guy you're looking for who is potentially armed, you're staring at him, and you have some other bad guy in another room down the hallway, right? It's not about what's a guarantee, it's about taking on measurable amounts of risk. And in that particular scenario, I would be willing to work more from the threshold than I would be to get inside the room, because the greater likelihood of risk I know is actually inside the room. In this next video, officers are serving a warrant at a residence for child sex crimes.
Also, please come out with your hands up. This is a Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office serving a search warrant 15513 Southwest. Also, please come out with your hands up.
Come outside! Come outside!
Quick.
He's coming out, he's coming out. Come outside! Open the door!
Sale con la mano para arriba.
¿Qué pasó?
Let's go, pa' afuera.
¿Qué pasó?
¡Pa' afuera, cojones! Let me see. Hey! Shots fired. Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. Come.
One of the unique things about this video is you see the officer who is actually breaching the door. He has his tool attached to his shield. I've never actually seen that done before. This might be something that they just rigged up. I'm not sure if they sell shields in that way where you can modify them and attach a breaching tool. I'm not sure how effective that is. It is cool to see, officers thinking about these things and trying to solve problems in different ways. So I can't say whether it is an effective, strategy or not, but I will say, if you have shields available to you or a shield available to you, you definitely want to utilize that shield at the breach point at the door. I saw a comment somewhere else where someone was kind of criticizing the fact that they didn't have a shield on the window to the left of the door. And it's like, well, you have to prioritize your tools if you don't have enough of them or whatever the case is in the areas where you think they're going to be the most advantageous for you. And obviously a shield at the door is going to be my choice 100% of the time versus utilizing shields on windows. I showed you guys that video of Phoenix SWAT serving a warrant, and they actually only had shields on the windows, didn't have a shield at the door, and they had 2 officers get shot, through the door. So if I have a shield, I'm definitely utilizing it at the breach point at the door. If I have multiple shields, we're gonna use those where we can accordingly, but definitely gonna prioritize having a shield at the breach point. Another thing I noticed is that a lot of these officers have their nods down. I'm not sure if they're actually looking through them or if they're looking under them or if they're kind of pushed out away from their eyesight. But it wouldn't really make sense to be looking through nods in this moment because they're all standing under white light. And on top of that, a lot of them are actually using their white light, which is fine, but there's no way that you could be looking through your nods in a light kind of scenario like that, because there's just no way that you're going to be able to see appropriately because you're going to be washed out, right? Your nods are going to be super bright. You're really not going to be able to see anything. And that's obviously not the scenario in which you should be utilizing your nods. And I guess because most of them are using white light, they're not actually, looking under them or looking through them. But this officer with the rifle who ends up taking, some shots on this guy, you can tell he has his nods down at least just because his shadow on the wall. And I'm not sure why he's not, it appears to me at least, that he's not actually throwing white light inside. And if you're outside and you're standing under white light and your buddies are using white light, you should definitely be throwing white light inside dark spaces because you are being backlit, right? You have no tactical advantage. You're not sitting in darkness. You are completely exposed to anybody inside looking outside, and the only tactical advantage you might have in that moment is to throw your white light inside that objective to disorient, distract, and to help you identify, potential threats. From the moment that this officer with the rifle sees the suspect, and he does come into the frame fast, he comes running as we see it from right to left, and it appears that it was about 3 seconds before the officer engaged him. And it does not appear to me, and you guys can help me out with this one, if this officer is actually utilizing his white light. And because it shows that he has his nods down, don't know if he's actually looking through them. I can't imagine he actually is. And he's not also throwing white light inside there, it kind of makes me believe, well, maybe he's trying to use his nods. And believe it or not, a lot of the time your nods are going to affect your ability to clearly identify, a threat. And it's gonna actually want you to take, an extra second or an extra second and a half, whatever that is, or even tenths of seconds to be completely sure that what you are seeing is a weapon. Is that what we're seeing here? I don't know. Is he actually looking underneath his nods, and are his nods kind of in the way and he's trying to identify? Not sure. All I'm gonna say is if you're outside standing under white light, your buddies are using white light, you have no tactical advantage, you are completely lit, you are at a tactical disadvantage. The only tactical advantage you could possibly gain is by throwing white light in there. And if he had done that, I believe that he would have clearly identified this guy had a gun a little bit sooner. And instead of taking 3 seconds to shoot him, maybe it would have taken a half a second or whatever it is, a ready up drill, right? Now I don't know. Also, he could have just been, in order to engage this guy, his criteria for serious bodily injury or death wasn't quite met yet, and that's why there was kind of a delay. So just something to consider. I do think that, these guys with these nods can overutilize them sometimes and force themselves to try and use them when they're not actually necessary. So, obviously understanding the conditions that you're putting yourself in. We're outside, we see there's lights, we already know this going into this objective. Nods in front of my eyes is not something that would be feasible in that moment. I already know that once this door comes open, I'm at a tactical disadvantage, and so immediately the door comes open, okay, I'm waiting for these people to get out of my way. As soon as they get out of my way, I'm throwing white light inside this objective because that may be the only tactical advantage you have in that moment. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Feed the algorithm down below and let me know what you guys think in the comments.